The Misty Show. The Misty Show, your number one companion. The Misty Show. The Misty Show, your number one companion.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Ms. D Show. My name is Adora Stephanie, and I'm your host. Today on The Ms. D Show, I have a very special guest. I'm sure you're wondering why I'm smiling. Well, because she is special. She's done a lot for women and girls in Nigeria and for widows as well. She is the manager, Women and Girls Nigerian Stability and Reconciliation Program, NSRP. She also is the past president of the Medical Women's Association of Nigeria and also the president, Widows Development Organization. I'm talking about no other than Dr. Eleanor Nwadinobi. Welcome to the show, Doctor. So, we've read about all sorts of stuff you've done for women and widows and girls, but, for those who don't know, what is NSRP and what do you guys do?
Yes, the Nigeria Stability and Reconciliation Program is a peace-building program. We work to support Nigeria to ensure that conflict is managed in a non-violent manner. And as the manager for women and girls, my specific day job is to look at how we can reduce violence against women and girls and ensure that women and girls participate in formal peace processes.
Well, that's the main idea behind this.
That's correct.
But then how do you guys go about, implementing this?
We go about implementing it to, first of all, to make sure that there's an enabling environment.
Right.
What's that enabling environment? It is found in a United Nations Security Council resolution, which is known as 1325.
Right.
Nigeria signed up to it 15 years ago, and 13 years later, Nigeria was able to domesticate it with support from the Nigeria Stability and Reconciliation Program.
Right.
So that is the foundation within which we situate our work. We then take that further to make sure that vulnerable groups, looking at, for example, groups of people living with disabilities, looking at widows, hawkers, and other vulnerable groups are protected, especially in the context of violent conflict. So what is happening regarding IDPs? So we're running peace clubs, and in those peace clubs we're teaching women and girls communication skills, how to report violence that occurs in their lives, because Adora, you know that there are issues around the culture of silence when it comes to violence. So people who suffer beating, for example, in a marriage are sometimes not likely to talk to about it, even to their best friends. And worse still, when it is sexual violence, there's a stigma associated with it. Sadly, you will find even a mother saying to her daughter, "Don't tell anybody that this happened to you because you won't get a husband." So by virtue of the peace clubs that we run through NSRP, we are giving young girls and women the incentive to report because there's a response and referral mechanism. We also have on our website, we have an observatory, a platform that gives data on the types of violence that occur up and down the country.
Right.
We give grants to organizations that we work with, and we're in 8 states in Nigeria.
Oh, 8, okay.
Oh, yes.
Which are?
Those states are conflict-affected states, so we're in Borno and Yobe, we're in Kano, Kaduna, Plateau, and we're in Rivers, Delta, and Bayelsa.
Wow, that's wide enough, So, when you say that you guys give, attention to these people who go through these things, when someone is suffering from something you've mentioned, i.e. violence at home, or has been probably sexually abused by, a relative or something, do they come directly to the office and have someone talk to? Because I know what most people are scared of is the stigma, like you mentioned, and the secrecy behind it. So people want confidentiality when they mention these things. So if someone out there is going through something like this and would need to speak to someone directly at NSRP, do they just come to an office, or do they have a helpline? And how do you ensure that, whatever they're telling you is going to remain confidential until it's been worked on?
The way NSRP has its observatory set up is we have partners.
Right.
And these partners are people who have a wealth of experience in dealing with cases of this nature. It's a holistic, multi-pronged approach. We have partners who have helplines. We have partners who have safe haven. The crucial thing, just as you've said, is to ensure that there's confidentiality, there's anonymity, that the survivor is protected, but more importantly, that the survivor knows that there is somebody who can attend to their welfare. So we have something called the Observatory Steering Committee, and that committee is made up of multiple stakeholders who can respond to the reports that come to them. So who do we have on that committee? We have religious leaders, we've got traditional leaders, we've got medical people, legal people who can provide trauma counseling. And therefore, even though we do not provide the services directly, indirectly, the cases that are referred to the OBSTEC are responded to through the constituencies. We also have security sector people. Therefore, if a perpetrator belongs to any one of those constituencies, through some form of peer pressure, questions will be asked of them and the cases will be investigated in a manner that the survivor knows that her confidentiality is protected. And that gives others also the incentive to report, because what happens at the moment, as I've said, is there's that stigma, there's the culture of silence, and on top of that, there's the culture of impunity.
That's perfect. I'm sure most of you have heard what she said. We will come back to talk more about what the NSRP does and how it can help you out there, and also what the Widow Development the organization is into and how it can help you. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after this break. And what do you actually do? What does it mean to be an MD, the CEO? What do your companies actually do? Right. So how do you reach out to these people? Like, what is your outreach like? Are you based in a certain area in Nigeria, like Abuja? Because I'm trying to understand how people get to know about, Designers Marketplace. For people who don't know what it is, they become touts, they become robbers, they start, unfortunately, the internet scam, and all sorts of ridiculous things. Because truth be told, they just can't get a job. Why we're curious, that brings me to ask, what are the hurdles musicians face in Nigeria today? What is the main hindrance that stops a lot of people from getting to where they need to get? Hello, and welcome back to the Ms. D Show. In case you're just joining us, we were talking to the lovely Dr. Eleanor nwadinobi, who is, like I've said before, the manager, Women and Girls Nigerian Stability and Reconciliation Program, NSRP. She was talking us through what the NSRP does, how you can benefit from it, and the confidentiality involved in speaking up on violences on women and sexual abuse and other things. So, Doctor, we mentioned how people can come up to NSRP and talk about what's going on in their lives and also how their confidentiality can be protected. We'd also like to know what your Widows Development Organization does and how it can help widows. What kind of widows are you guys looking out for? The ones who've been marginalized, or the ones who are going through what exactly? And if there's anyone out there who's going through something like that, how can they reach you guys and what can you offer them?
Yes, the Widows Development Organization was set up in 1995.
Okay.
And this was at a time when widows were going through horrendous, harmful traditional practices. What were these practices? You had practices such as women having to drink the bath water in which their husbands' corpses were washed. Women weren't allowed to bath for varying periods of time. They were restricted in the kinds of food they ate and the clothes they wore. And, coming across that at that particular time in the southeast of Nigeria, we decided to do some research into what the prevalent practices were. And we came, the results of the research showed that indeed those practices were prevalent, not just amongst the rural poor, but also amongst the city dwellers. And therefore an organization was set up by concerned women, and it was called the Widows Development Organization, and on purpose it was called widow, W-I-D-O, because at that time the word widow was almost a taboo word.
Right.
And therefore we wanted people to realize that widows are human beings. If perchance the Lord decides to take away their husbands first, it's no fault of theirs. At that time there was the belief that the woman was the cause of the man's death, and some of these practices were punitive. You had situations where the woman was passed on to the next surviving male in the family. Property that she and her husband owned jointly was taken away from her, and therefore the Widows Development Organization began the struggle to protect women who were going through such practices. And it took all of 6 years, alongside some very strong activists in Enugu State working with us, for us to be able to get the State House of Assembly in 2001 to pass the bill on widows and widowers' rights.
Okay.
And that was passed in the year 2001 on International Women's Day. I'm glad to say that today most of those practices have died out.
Right.
However, you still have remnants of practices such as disinheritance, because in the southeast of Nigeria, sadly, you hardly find families giving their daughters property. So you find a situation where a woman who is married does not inherit property from her father, landed property, and then she's married, and sadly, if her husband dies first, again she doesn't have property from her husband's family, and she's then left as the breadwinner with no fixed property. And even when you find that the husband has written a will, that will is not carried out in a way that protects her and the children. And therefore you then find all of a sudden children who were in school, in education, dropping out of school, and you find the woman struggling with the children. So today, the Widows Development Organization still is working in the rural areas of Enugu State, especially in Abia State, educating women on the laws that are available to protect them. So the information is out there.
Okay, so for women who are trying to find out how they can benefit from this and the different options available to them, how can they reach you guys? Is there a helpline for those who don't have access to the internet?
There isn't a helpline, but indeed we do have organizations now that are very vibrant, like the legal aid.
Right.
You have the female lawyers who are taking on, cases where they can step in and stand up on behalf of widows whose rights have been violated.
Okay, that's perfect. You've heard that all from the Dr. Eleanor Nwadinobi, talking about women's rights, widows in particular, how they can, benefit from their husband's properties after he's dead in case they have been marginalized by the people from his side. We'll be right back after this short break to talk about 10 very important tips on how to keep a healthy marriage. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after this commercial. welcome back to the Ms. D Show. My name is Adora Stephanie Wodo, and I'm your host. In case you're just joining us, we were talking to the lovely Dr. Eleanor nwadinobi. Now she's going to tell us about marriage, how to keep a healthy marriage. Doctor, how many years have you been married for?
I am pleased to say that I have been happily married for 32 years.
You can see the glow in her face. I'm even glowing. That is to show you this is genuine happiness. She has been happily married. I mean, you know, today, marriages are just, they're not what it used to be during your time. Because, I mean, now there's so many vices. Young girls get married for the wrong reasons. I'm running out of time. All my friends are getting married. Young boys married for the wrong reasons. They're broke. This girl's dad is richer than, you know, and they can get it on a platter of gold. So there's a lot of things going on. People don't study each other anymore. People get married and, you know, a year, 2 years down the line, they cannot even tolerate one another. So, I mean, what do you have to tell the younger people, you know, the youths of today? How do you keep together a marriage? How do you make your marriage healthy and actually last longer amidst all the vices?
Well, I think the first thing to say is there are a lot of pressures on the modern day marriage, more pressures than there were before. No two marriages are the same. There are no hard and fast rules. However, there are guiding principles.
Okay.
And as a woman of faith, I take my cue from the Word of God, which is a manual. In fact, you know, as a woman of faith, you find out that the marriage institution was instituted by the Lord Himself. And I like to say to people, marriage is like a bed of roses.
You can see her.
And people say to me, you know, how can you say that? And I say, absolutely a bed of roses. Why? Because you have the soft petals, you have the wonderful fragrance which you enjoy. However, when you look closely at that bed of roses, you find out that on the stalks of the roses, there are thorns. And that's why I will say marriage is like a bed of roses, because even in trying to remove those thorns from the stalk, you can get bruised and you can get hurt.
That is fantastic. I'm just thinking about the bed and all the roses. I mean, the way she talks about marriage, you would think, you know, she's on cloud 100. I'm sure she is. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are. But I'm sure a lot of you also are not on that bed just yet. Or you are on the bed, but you just haven't seen it as a bed of roses. So that's why Doctor was trying to give us the key points on what you should do to keep it together. Or make your bed of thorns a bed of roses.
So how should we start? What are those guiding principles? The first is to prayerfully pursue. So just like you were saying, Adora, people getting married for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
Have you prayed about the type of spouse you want, the sort of person you want to spend the rest of your life with? And I mean the rest of your life. It's day in, day out, 24/7, as long as you are together in the same physical space. And I believe in what I call investigative courtship. What do I mean by that? When you start dating, ask all the relevant questions that are important to you. It could be as simple as, you know, what is it that you like to eat? Find out what sort of, you know, pastime the person likes, because he or she might be spending a lot of time with you, but you may not realize that the person really prefers to go and look at elephants. And if you wait to get married, and then suddenly your spouse says, oh, this weekend I'm traveling to the game reserve to look at elephants, and you don't like elephants, it comes as a shock. So you need to be able to discuss everything. Do you want 10 children or do you want 1 child? So investigative courtship, ask the correct questions through your dating period. It could be a short dating period, it could be a long one, but use that time to find out what one another like. And then, love is just that key ingredient. People use the love, the word love sometimes, casually, but you find out that, you fall more deeply in love with one another. Sometimes people will tell you, oh, it came like a thunderbolt. But the true test of love is when there's a trial. Do you love that person even though the person has said something hurtful? Are you constantly wanting to please the person even though the person has hurt you or has said something, annoying? Marriage is a lifelong commitment. And as I said before, I get my guidance from the Word of God that says, a man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. So as difficult as that is, the man literally has to make his initial family secondary and now take on this new family. And remember that this might not be the best thing that the family might appreciate at first, but it's something that, he just has to do. And that's why the Word of God says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor. And indeed, that the wife that God gives you is your best reward. Now, nobody is perfect. The man may not be perfect, the woman would not be perfect, but together they complement one another. And therefore, one of the principles is that of complementarity. I may not be outgoing, my spouse may be outgoing. How do we now strike that balance and, support one another? And then, unlike what a lot of people say, the Bible talks about mutual submission. If people say, what's the essence of marriage? It's companionship. Sometimes with my husband, it's just even knowing that he's right there in the house. Just knowing that he's nearby. Somebody to talk to.
That sounds so beautiful. I feel like I just, drifted away. It sounds like a poem. I feel like I'm in that marriage already. She has a book, by the way. The doctor has written a book called Bone of My Bones, Flesh of My Flesh by Dr. Eleanor and nwadinobi. Doctor, is there a way we can get this book if someone wants to buy it, or is it on the internet or online?
Do you know, I printed this book for our 20th anniversary, which was 12 years ago. It went out of print, and now that my daughter is getting ready to get married, I fished it out again, and I said, I'm going to, do a reprint of this book. So it will soon be available. It's a small, easy to read book that just talks about the guiding principles.
How many kids do you have?
I've got 4 delightful children. So, and the key thing to remember is it's not all smooth running, but it's how you weather the storms together.
That is fantastic. For you viewers out there on the Ms. D Show, if you send us an email and tell us 1 or 2 things you've learned from the doctor, you would get a free book courtesy of the Ms. D Show. So get on the website at www.themsdshow.com, send us an email, tell us what you're going through, tell us what you've learned, and whether this show has actually inspired you in having a more blissful marriage. In the doctor's words, a marriage which is like a bed of roses. Until next time, thanks for watching the Ms. D Show, and stay tuned. Remember, be inspired.
The Ms. D Show. The Ms. D Show, your #1 companion.